Hi folks, I've just finished reading a really great little post-apocalyptic novel called Survivors, written by Terry Nation. Now, if you're from the UK and as old as me, as in you remember the 1970s, this might be familiar to you, specifically by the logo on the book. Survivors was a television series from the BBC in the 1970s about a global pandemic, specifically one that wiped out, I don't know, maybe 1 in every 5,000 people, so hardly anyone's left. So not exactly COVID-19, but it's funny, isn't it, how fiction about pandemics and TV shows and movies about pandemics are really popular now that we're in a pandemic. It's kind of weird, isn't it? You'd think we'd want to be thinking less about that and less about how bad it can be. But no, we get really interested in it. If you go to Netflix and Amazon Prime, you know, they're throwing pandemic movies in your face. But anyway, I seem to be jumping on the bandwagon here, so I spotted this book going for £1 on the Kindle store this month, and I remembered it. I remembered watching it. I've seen it a few times, in fact. It's not a series that I own, but it's one that I do fondly remember. Very, very intelligent TV series. Now, this appears to be the novelization of it, written by the actual series creator, Terry Nation. So it's not a book that has been farmed out to someone. You know how they do, like a movie comes out and they go, okay, we need somebody to write the novel, throw that script over to such and such a writer, and they churn something out and it comes out along with the movie or series, and it's just part of the publicity for it. Whereas this has been actually written by the series creator, and you can tell he has a vested interest in really doing a good job. It actually, I'm not sure which came first, the novel or the series, because there's an afterword that seems to indicate that he wrote this novel specifically as something apart from the series. And then maybe the series came after the novel was written. I'm not sure. I'm not sure that it matters in this case, given the fact that it's the same guy, Terry Nation. Again, if you're from the US, you may not know who that is, but we Brits are familiar with Terry Nation because he's the guy that created the TV series Blake 7, which I love. One of my favorite science fiction television shows from way back. An absolute fixture of my childhood that's unforgettable. Any Americans and people from elsewhere that are fond of Star Trek should really look up Blake 7, just for a vintage space opera that's something a bit different from Star Trek, and in my opinion a lot better, despite the shaky sets and low budget. I'm going to talk about Blake 7 for a second, even though it's kind of off topic, because it was just something that was so good. It's different from Star Trek because it was described by Terry Nation as the Dirty Dozen in space, if you remember the movie The Dirty Dozen. So the crew of the spaceship Liberator, as it's called, they're ex-convicts. In fact, they're escaped convicts for the most part, with the exception of Blake, who is a framed political leader, who's the only innocent one among them. So it's kind of set within the backdrop of something like the Empire of Star Wars, except it's called the Federation. And it spans the galaxy and it's corrupt. So Blake and his band of mischievous misfits are against the Federation with this fantastic, heavily armored spacecraft that they have, alien spacecraft that they've managed to get a hold of. And it's just about the various adventures that they get up to and the mischief they get up to, because what makes it fun is they're not exactly moral all the time. They're smugglers and thieves and embezzlers and stuff like that. So, really good TV show. If you've never heard of it, please check it out. Blake 7. Terry Nation also created the Daleks, which everyone's heard of, right? He wrote the very first Dalek adventure back in the William Hartnell era of Doctor Who, just called The Daleks. He also wrote The Dalek Invasion of Earth, and went on to do a number of other Dalek adventures, including creating the popular character Davros. So, if you've never heard of Terry Nation, now you have. So this novel was written with a lot of artistry. You could tell he really cared. And it's essentially about life after a global pandemic, the survivors banding together, and it's really intelligent. I hesitate almost to call it science fiction because it's so gritty and down to earth. As it's very much, this is what you would really expect life to be like if this sort of a disaster really happened. You get characters who are parasitic, who just want to have a good time with what's left. There's one guy who was a tramp, and he's driving around in a Rolls Royce now and putting on shirts from fancy shops. And then there's another character who decides to set himself up as the new government, essentially, and it's going to be like almost feudal in nature. Then there's an interesting character who used to be a well-to-do lord, but the sort of guy who went on adventures, kind of like Ray Mears, you know, and he absolutely loves the new world because he's kind of a survivalist and he's never been happier. The old world didn't suit him at all and he just loves it now. And most of the action concerns a group of characters who are really just trying to figure out what to do next and what the best course of action is. And they come to realize that what has befallen them is more than just, how do I put this into words? Think about it like this. Would you know how to make a spoon? You know, think about all the things that go into making a spoon, from the getting of the metal to everything that happens in the factory and all the rest of it. We wouldn't have a clue. So, you know, how could you make a computer, for instance? How could you make any piece of machinery? Could you even make a candle? Yeah, that's probably the easiest one, but you'd have to go to a book to figure out what to do and with animal fat and everything to make a candle. So there's all this stuff lying around that works now. It's not going to work forever. There's all these food stores lying around, but they're not going to last forever. And essentially, the problem is that we have a world of specialization where everybody plays a little part in a whole big massive enterprise, and there's no one person in control of the whole thing. So now that there's so few people around, everything's just lying idle and nobody knows how to preserve it, how to make more stuff. So we've essentially been reduced to medieval times, you know? So really, really intelligently written. And if you've never seen the TV series, it will make a great standalone novel, especially if you're a fan of stuff like John Christopher or The Death of Grass, I'm thinking of here, or John Wyndham, Day of the Triffids. It's written very much like those kinds of novels, and it's from a similar time period. I think those were written a bit earlier. This is from the 70s, those were from the 50s and 60s. But it has that more dated feel, that it feels like a John Christopher or John Wyndham novel. So if you like that kind of thing and you miss that kind of thing and you've got all those novels read, here's one you probably haven't read. If you're a fan of the TV series and you've seen it, there's a really good reason why you should read this anyway, because it only follows the series up to a point. It's been so long since I've seen this series. As I was reading it, the memories of watching it were jumping back into my head, and it's going, oh yeah, I remember this, I remember that, I remember the next thing. And it felt like it followed the series very closely. And then all of a sudden, about 2/3 of the way through, it's divided into 3 parts, especially with part 3, everything went in a completely different direction that I did not expect. And all I had to think was, this is not the series I remember. And it was good because it was unexpected, and it gave me, the final third of the novel was like a whole different thing that I had no reference point for, and was completely new, and therefore there was no staleness about it, there was no sense of repetition about it, and there was a shock ending, which I will not spoil, that has nothing to do with the television series and how the television series progressed. If you remember the TV series, it was really good for season 1, and it kind of went downhill. And by the end of it all, it was becoming a kind of Emmerdale Farm in the apocalypse sort of drama. It does not go that way in the novel. It goes completely different from that, and it's much more interesting and exciting. Although I would say probably the third part of the novel is probably the weakest part. It's most strongest in the beginning, but it still makes a great story overall, and one that you should read. And interestingly, I was checking out the Wikipedia page for Terry Nation prior to making this review, and I noted that Terry Nation was only involved in series 1 of The Survivors, or Survivors, there's no the. There were creative differences between him and someone else, which meant that he left and someone else took the helm for series 2 and 3. So what you're probably getting with this novel is Terry Nation's original vision that he did not get to do due to creative differences. So for that reason alone, fans of the series should definitely check it out. So that's Survivors by Terry Nation. It's on the Kindle now for £1. If you're a Kindle reader, go get it. Alright folks, take care.
The sky